The birthday cake sat untouched on the marble counter, 32 candles slowly melting into wax, while the billionaire handed his pregnant wife divorce papers with the same casual indifference he would use to fire an assistant. She had woken up that morning excited to show him the company rebrand she had spent 3 months creating, for free, because that is what wives do, right? But instead of gratitude, she got a manila envelope, a mistress wearing her dead foster mother's robe, and an invitation to his wedding with another woman, scheduled for 6 weeks away, at the same venue where they had exchanged vows. Here is the part that destroyed me. When his mother arrived, she looked at this pregnant woman standing in her own kitchen and said, quote, "Foster kids do not know how to be family. They are too damaged." End quote. Elena had $847 in her bank account. No family, no friends who were not his friends first, and a baby due in 8 weeks. They thought she would disappear quietly. They thought she would take the settlement and vanish. They thought wrong. Because what Marcus Whitmore did not know was that his pregnant wife had been documenting everything, every design she created, every file she saved, every lie he told. And 6 weeks later, she walked into his wedding reception with nothing but a folder of documents and the baby kicking inside her. What she revealed destroyed everything the Whitmore family had built their empire upon. But the path from that birthday morning to that wedding day, it nearly killed her. 3 times. This is the story of how one woman lost everything, and then burned it all down with the truth, lesson and value statement. Before we begin, I want you to understand something important. This story is not about revenge. It is about survival. It is about what happens when you stop waiting for someone to save you and start saving yourself. If you have ever been underestimated, if you have ever been discarded by someone who promised to love you forever, if you have ever stood at rock bottom wondering how you would possibly climb out, this story is for you. You will learn 3 critical lessons today. First, document everything. Trust is beautiful, but documentation is protection. Second, accept help when it is offered. Isolation is their weapon. Community is yours. And third, rock bottom is not the end. It is a foundation. Every woman who watches this story will walk away with practical wisdom she can use if she ever finds herself in Elena's situation. And every person who shares it might be putting this knowledge into the hands of someone who desperately needs it right now. The wedding reception sparkled with $10,000 worth of white roses and the kind of false smiles that only old money could afford. 400 guests turned to stare as Elena Collins walked through the grand entrance of the Plaza Hotel, her 8-month pregnant belly leading the way, her thrift store dress altered by her own hands to accommodate the life growing inside her. She had $47 left in her bank account. She had no lawyer, she had no family, but she had something far more valuable tucked under her arm, a folder of documents that would destroy everything the Whitmore family had built their lives upon. Diane Whitmore approached first, champagne flute in hand, her Chanel suit worth more than Elena had earned in the past 3 months combined. The older woman's smile was razor-sharp as she looked Elena up and down with the kind of assessment usually reserved for livestock at auction. Security was supposed to keep the trash outside, Diane said, loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. Elena met her gaze without flinching. "I am not here for your son, Mrs. Whitmore. I am here for the 400 witnesses who are about to learn what kind of family they are celebrating. But to understand why Elena Collins walked into her ex-husband's wedding with nothing but a folder of documents and the baby kicking inside her, we need to go back 6 weeks. To her 32nd birthday. to the morning that destroyed everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the man she had given 5 years of her life to build. The morning had started with hope, something that felt almost foreign to Elena after 3 years of marriage to a man who had stopped seeing her months ago. She woke at 6 in the morning, her hand instinctively moving to the swell of her belly, where their daughter had been kicking with increasing frequency. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine that today might be different, her 32nd birthday. Maybe Marcus would remember. Maybe he would look at her the way he used to, back when she was the talented graphic designer he had pursued relentlessly, not the pregnant wife he seemed to resent. She climbed out of bed carefully, her body aching in the way that late pregnancy demanded, and padded to the kitchen of their Manhattan penthouse, the space she had designed herself, selecting every paint color and piece of furniture with the kind of care that came from someone who had never had a real home growing up. 18 years in foster care had taught Elena that homes were temporary, that families were something other people had, that love was conditional and usually came with an expiration date. But Marcus had promised her something different. He had promised her forever. Her pregnancy craving hit at 6:15, and she found herself standing at the refrigerator, dipping pickle slices into peanut butter and eating them over the sink like a criminal hiding evidence. I know, she whispered to her belly. Your mom is disgusting, but you wanted it. The baby kicked in response, and Elena smiled despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. She had been up until 2 in the morning finishing Marcus's stud company rebrand presentation. 3 months of work, unpaid, because that was what wives did. At least, that was what Marcus had told her when she had suggested billing his company for her design services. We are family, Elena. Family does not charge family. She had believed him. She had always believed him. The front door opened at 8, and Elena's heart lifted as Marcus walked in. His suit was immaculate despite the early hour, his dark hair perfectly styled, his jaw set in that determined way she had once found attractive. She rushed to meet him, her laptop already open to the presentation she had created. 3 months of work condensed into 47 slides that would transform Whitmore Development's entire visual identity. New logo, new color palette, new marketing materials, everything designed to position his company as the premier commercial real estate developer in the Northeast. Happy birthday to me, she said with a nervous laugh. I finished your rebrand. I know you have the investor meeting next week, and I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. Marcus barely glanced at the screen. We need to talk. Something cold settled in Elena's stomach. She noticed it then, the details her foster care survival instincts had been screaming about for months, but she had refused to acknowledge. His shirt was buttoned wrong, one hole off from the collar. His cologne was different, something floral and feminine that did not match the woody scent he usually wore. His eyes would not meet hers. Her body knew before her heart was ready to accept it. Her hands began to tremble. Marcus, what is going on? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. The movement was casual, almost dismissive, like he was handing her a takeout menu instead of the document that would destroy her life. Elena's hands shook as she opened it. The words blurred through sudden tears, but one phrase stood out with devastating clarity. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks! He had been planning this for nearly a month while she had been researching nursery colors and interviewing potential nannies. While she had been rubbing her swollen feet and dreaming about their daughter's first Christmas. Marcus, she whispered, it is my birthday. I know, he said, his voice carrying the same tone he used in board meetings when delivering quarterly reports. I wanted a clean start for both of us. A sound from the bedroom made Elena turn. A woman emerged, blonde and beautiful, in the way that came from expensive maintenance, wearing a silk robe that Elena recognized immediately. The robe her foster mother had given her when she aged out of the system at 18, the only thing she had from anyone who had ever loved her. Brittany Ashford, Marcus's executive assistant for the past 2 years. The woman Elena had invited to dinner parties and included in holiday gift lists because she was part of Marcus's work family. "Babe, where did you put my dash?" Brittany started, then stopped when she saw Elena. "Oh, she is still here." Marcus wrapped his arm around Brittany's waist with casual possession. "Elena, I need you to understand. Brittany makes me feel like a man. You made me feel like a project manager." "I built your brand," Elena said, her voice cracking. "I designed everything. The logo, the website, the marketing materials, 5 years of work." "And I paid the bills," Marcus replied. "We are even." The front door crashed open before Elena could respond. Diane Whitmore swept in like a hurricane of Hermes scarves and judgment, her presence always capable of making Elena feel small and inadequate. "Is she gone yet?" Diane asked Marcus, without acknowledging Elena's existence. "The movers are charging by the hour." Elena stared at her mother-in-law, the woman who had spent 3 years making subtle comments about Elena's background, about how foster children never quite learned how to be family, about how damaged people attracted damaged situations. "I told Marcus when he married you," Diane said, finally turning to address Elena directly. "Foster kids do not know how to be family. They are too damaged. But he thought he could fix you." Elena's baby kicked hard, as if in protest. She placed her hand on her belly and whispered so quietly that only she could hear. "I know, sweetheart. Grandma is a nightmare. Do not worry. You will never have to meet her." Marcus pulled another envelope from his briefcase. Cream-colored, gold lettering, an invitation to his wedding with Brittany, scheduled for 6 weeks away at the Plaza Hotel, the same venue where Elena and Marcus had exchanged vows 3 years ago. "We are keeping the original deposit," Diane said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Consider it payment for the graphic design work." The movers arrived at 11, 2 hours before the noon deadline Marcus had given her. They walked through the penthouse with clipboards and tape guns, marking boxes with Elena's name like they were cataloging evidence at a crime scene. Elena stood in the bedroom she had shared with her husband for 3 years, watching strangers pack her life into cardboard containers. Her clothes went into wardrobe boxes without regard for how she had organized them. Her books were shoved into crates without checking if the spines would survive the journey. Her design portfolio, 15 years of work that represented everything she had built from nothing, was tossed into a box marked miscellaneous. "Be careful with that," she said, reaching for the portfolio. "Those are my original designs." One of the movers, a heavy-set man with a neck tattoo and surprisingly kind eyes, paused. "Ma'am, we were told to pack everything quickly. There is a time limit. That is my work, my career. It took me years to build that portfolio." The mover looked at Marcus, who had appeared in the doorway with his arms crossed. "Mr. Whitmore, the lady says these are important. Pack it with everything else," Marcus said. "She can sort through it at the storage unit." "Storage unit?" Elena turned to face him. "What storage unit? I rented you a unit in Queens. 6 months prepaid. After that, you are on your own. Queens. 45 minutes from Manhattan by subway. 45 minutes from the life she had built, the connections she had made, the clients who occasionally still called her for freelance work. "Marcus, I am 7 months pregnant. Where am I supposed to live? That is not my problem anymore, Elena. You signed a prenup. You get the settlement amount and nothing else. the prenup. Elena remembered signing it 6 years ago when she was 26 and so desperately in love that she would have signed anything Marcus put in front of her. He had framed it as protection for both of them. Standard practice for someone in his position. Nothing to worry about. She had not had a lawyer review it. She had not had anyone review it. She was so grateful to finally have family, finally have someone who chose her, that she would have signed away her soul if he had asked. The standard settlement amount, according to the document she now remembered in painful detail, was $50,000. Enough to survive for maybe a year in New York, if she was careful. Not enough to raise a child. Not enough to rebuild a life. I worked for your company for 5 years, she said. I created every piece of marketing material, every brand element, every visual identity you use to win clients. That work has to be worth something. Marcus laughed. The sound was cold and unfamiliar, nothing like the warm chuckle she remembered from their early dating days. You were my wife, Elena. Wives do not get paid for supporting their husbands. That is what marriage is. Was, Elena corrected, was what marriage was. Brittany appeared behind Marcus, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. The divorce is already filed, Victoria. You should probably start thinking about your next steps. My name is Elena, Brittany shrugged. Whatever. The point is, you need to leave. We have a wedding to plan. By noon, Elena stood on the sidewalk outside the building she had called home for 3 years. 2 suitcases sat beside her, containing everything the movers had deemed personal enough to hand over directly. Her laptop, some clothes, a few photographs. The silk robe Brittany had been wearing was not among them. She tried her key in the lobby door out of habit. It no longer worked. The doorman she had exchanged pleasantries with every day for 3 years would not meet her eyes. I am sorry, Mrs. Collins, he mumbled. Building policy, she walked to the corner and tried to use the ATM. Her bank card was declined. Marcus had frozen the joint account, the one she had deposited her freelance earnings into, because he had said it was easier for tax purposes. Her phone buzzed once, then went silent. She checked the screen. Service disconnected. Elena stood on a Manhattan street corner in January, 7 months pregnant, with 2 suitcases, a dead phone, and $847 in her personal savings account. The account she had opened secretly 3 years ago, depositing small amounts from birthday gifts and occasional cash payments, because some part of her had never stopped being the foster kid who knew that safety required a backup plan. $847. No family. No friends who were not Marcus's friends first. And a baby due in 8 weeks. She walked to the nearest coffee shop and asked to use their Wi-Fi. The barista looked at her pregnant belly and her designer suitcases that did not match her desperate expression and nodded toward a table in the corner. Elena logged into her bank account and confirmed what she already knew. $847.16. The cost of a month's rent in most of Manhattan. 6 weeks in a cheap hotel. Maybe 2 months in a shared apartment in an outer borough. She opened Google and searched for divorce attorneys. The first result offered free consultations. She called from the coffee shop's landline, explaining her situation to a receptionist who sounded bored until Elena mentioned the name Whitmore. Hold, please, the receptionist said, and suddenly Elena was transferred to an actual attorney. Mrs. Collins, the attorney said, after hearing her story. Without documentation of your contributions to his business, you will get standard alimony, maybe $2,000 a month for 3 years. The prenup you signed limits everything else, but I created his entire brand. I have the files on my laptop. Do you have contracts? Invoices? Any written acknowledgement of your work? Elena thought about it. Every conversation about her work had been verbal. Every request for design services had come through text messages or casual dinner conversation. She had never invoiced Marcus because a he was her husband. Family did not charge family. No, she admitted. I trusted him. The attorney sighed. I understand. Unfortunately, trust is not admissible in court. If you had documentation of your contributions, we might be able to make a case for additional compensation. But without it, his attorneys will argue that any work you did was simply the contribution of a supportive spouse. What about the pregnancy? Does that change anything? It might affect custody arrangements, but not the financial settlement. New York is an equitable distribution state, but the prenup supersedes most of that. So what do I do? The attorney paused. My honest advice? Take the settlement, find stable housing, focus on your baby. Fighting someone with Marcus Whitmore's resources will only drain whatever money you have left, Elena thanked him and hung up. She sat in the coffee shop for another hour, staring at her laptop screen, trying to figure out what to do next. The baby kicked, hard and insistent, as if demanding attention. Elena placed her hand on her belly and whispered, I know, sweetheart. Mama is trying. I just need to figure out the next step. She thought about the conversation she had just had. The attorney's advice had been practical, sensible, exactly what someone in her situation should probably follow. Take the settlement, find housing, focus on survival. But something in Elena refused to accept it. 18 years in foster care had taught her that sometimes the system was not designed to help people like her. Sometimes you had to find your own way. Sometimes rock bottom was just a foundation to build on. She closed her laptop and picked up her suitcases. The bus stop was 2 blocks away. She did not know where she was going, but she knew she could not stay here, sitting in a coffee shop, waiting for someone else to solve her problems. If she had learned anything from growing up without a family, it was this. Nobody was coming to save her. She would have to save herself. The bus stop bench was cold and hard, but Elena had sat on worse. She had spent nights on park benches as a teenager when foster placements fell through. She had slept in homeless shelters when social workers were between assignments. She had learned to find comfort in discomfort, to treat uncertainty as a familiar friend rather than a terrifying enemy. She was trying to use the free Wi-Fi from the coffee shop across the street, struggling to get a signal strong enough to search for affordable housing, when a woman sat down beside her. Rosa Williams was 45 years old, with kind eyes and grocery bags that suggested she had just come from the discount supermarket 3 blocks north. Her coat was practical rather than fashionable, her shoes sensible flats that had seen better days, and her smile was the first genuine warmth Elena had encountered since Marcus had handed her those divorce papers. You okay, honey? Rosa asked. Elena looked up from her phone. I am fine, just figuring out my next step. Rosa nodded slowly, her eyes taking in the designer suitcases, the pregnant belly, the red-rimmed eyes that suggested recent crying. That is what I said when my husband left me with 3 kids and a mortgage, just figuring out my next step. I was sitting at this exact bus stop, actually. Elena felt something crack in her carefully maintained composure. Really? 12 years ago. My youngest was 4. My oldest was 11. My husband decided he wanted to find himself in California with his secretary. Left me with $200 and a stack of bills I did not know existed. What did you do? Rosa smiled. I figured out my next step, then the one after that, then the one after that. It took a while, but eventually the steps started adding up to something that looked like a life. She reached into one of her grocery bags and pulled out a banana. Here, for the baby. My grandmother used to say, bananas cure everything. She was wrong about that, but the potassium does not hurt. Elena took the banana, and something about the simple kindness of the gesture made her eyes fill with tears. She had not eaten since yesterday. She had been so focused on the rebrand presentation, then the divorce papers, then the eviction, that food had become an afterthought. "Thank you," she managed. Rosa watched her peel the banana with trembling hands. "You got somewhere to stay tonight?" Elena shook her head. "I was going to look for a hotel. Something cheap. Cheap hotels in Manhattan are either roach motels or $200 a night. Neither one is good for a pregnant woman." Rosa paused, seeming to weigh something internally. "I have a couch. It is not much. My apartment is small and loud because I have 3 teenagers who do not understand the concept of indoor voices. But the water is hot, and I make really good chicken and dumplings." "I could not impose," Elena started. "Honey, you are not imposing. I am offering. There is a difference." Rosa stood and gathered her grocery bags. "The bus will be here in 4 minutes. You coming or not?" Elena looked at the stranger, who had no reason to help her, who had her own problems, and her own struggles, and her own life to manage. Every foster care instinct she had screamed that this was too good to be true, that kindness always came with strings, that people did not help other people without expecting something in return. But her baby kicked again, hard and insistent, and Elena realized that her survival instincts were no longer just about herself. She had another life to protect now, another person who was counting on her to make good decisions. "Why are you helping me?" Elena asked. "You do not even know me," Rosa smiled. "Because 12 years ago, I was sitting on this bench with nowhere to go, and a woman named Dorothy offered me her couch. She did not know me either, but she knew what it felt like to be alone and scared and out of options. She said the only way to pay her back was to help someone else someday. So here I am. Helping someone else?" The bus arrived, its doors hissing open with a sound that felt like possibility. Elena picked up her suitcases and followed Rosa aboard. Rosa's apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator worked intermittently, the hallway smelled like someone's overcooked dinner, and the sounds of family life echoed through the thin walls from every direction. But when Rosa opened her door, Elena saw something she had not expected. She saw home. The apartment was small, yes. The furniture was mismatched, clearly assembled from yard sales and discount stores over many years. The walls were covered with family photographs and children's artwork, and a cross that suggested Rosa's faith was not just decorative, but it was clean, it was warm, and it was full of the kind of love that Elena had spent her entire life searching for. "Kids," Rosa called out, "we have a guest. Come say hello." 3 teenagers emerged from various doorways. Kevin, 16, with his mother's kind eyes and a laptop tucked under his arm. Sarah, 14, with braces and a skeptical expression. And Michael, 12, with the boundless energy of someone who had not yet learned that the world could be cruel. "Everyone, this is Elena," Rosa announced. "She is going to be staying with us for a few days." Sarah looked Elena up and down. "Is she the one you were talking to at the bus stop? The pregnant lady with the fancy suitcases?" "Sarah," Rosa said warningly. "What? I saw you through the window. You were giving her a banana?" Elena smiled despite herself. "Your mom was very kind. I appreciate her letting me stay." Kevin stepped forward, his attention focused on the laptop bag Elena was carrying. "That is a nice computer. What do you use it for?" "I am a graphic designer," Elena said. "I create logos and marketing materials and brand identities for companies." Kevin's eyes lit up. "Really? That is cool. I am into tech stuff, computers, servers, that kind of thing. Do you know anything about metadata?" The question seemed random, but something about Kevin's eager expression reminded Elena of herself at that age. Always curious, always trying to learn new skills, always aware that knowledge was the one thing no one could take away from you. A little bit, she said. Why do you ask? Kevin shrugged. Just curious. Come on, I will show you where you can put your stuff. Mom, when is dinner? 2 hours, Rosa said. And Kevin, do not interrogate our guest. She has had a long day. Later that night, after a dinner that was exactly as good as Rosa had promised, Elena sat on the couch that would be her bed and tried to make sense of her situation. She had called the divorce attorney back using Rosa's phone, getting his voicemail and leaving a message that she needed to understand her options better. She had searched online for information about prenuptial agreements in New York, finding a maze of legal jargon that made her head hurt. She had also done something she had been avoiding since she left the penthouse. She had gone through the files on her laptop. 5 years of design work, hundreds of files, logos, brochures, website mock-ups, presentation templates. Every visual element that Whitmore Development used to attract clients and close deals, all of it created by her, on her personal computer during the years she had been married to Marcus. Kevin appeared in the doorway, his laptop open. Mrs. Elena, can I show you something? It is just Elena. And sure, he sat beside her on the couch and turned his screen toward her. I was looking at those design files you mentioned at dinner. The ones you made for your husband's company. Elena felt a flash of alarm. How did you access my files? Kevin's cheeks reddened. I did not hack your computer or anything. I just saw the folder names when you had your laptop open earlier. But here's the thing. I looked up Whitmore Development online, and they are using all of your designs. The logo, the website, everything. I know. I created them. But here's the interesting part. Kevin pointed at his screen. Their website says the brand identity was created by something called Ashford Creative Solutions. I looked them up. They are a design firm owned by someone named Harold Ashford. Elena's blood ran cold. Ashford. The same last name as Brittany. She grabbed Kevin's laptop and started searching. Within 10 minutes, she had confirmed what she had feared. Her designs, every single one of them, had been credited to Ashford Creative Solutions, a company that had been registered 3 years ago, the same year she married Marcus. Kevin, she said slowly, can you show me something about metadata, about how to prove when a file was created? Kevin grinned. Mrs. Elena, I thought you would never ask. The county law library smelled like old paper and bureaucracy. Elena had arrived at opening time, her laptop bag over her shoulder and a folder full of printouts clutched in her hands. She had barely slept the night before, staying up with Kevin as he walked her through the technical details of file metadata. Every digital file, Kevin had explained, carries information about when it was created and modified. Your original designs have creation dates from 5 years ago. Ashford Creative Solutions was not registered until 3 years ago. That means your files existed before their company did. It was the first piece of good news Elena had received since her birthday. But she knew that proving something was true and proving it in court were two very different things. The law library offered free resources for people representing themselves in civil cases. Elena had decided to file pro se without an attorney because she could not afford the $15,000 retainer that every lawyer she had contacted had quoted. The $50,000 settlement from Marcus would barely cover living expenses for the next year. She could not waste it on legal fees that might not even lead to victory. She found a quiet table in the corner and spread out her materials. The prenuptial agreement, which she had read so many times that she could recite it from memory. The divorce filing, with its clinical language about irreconcilable differences, and her own documentation. The file list, she had compiled showing every design she had created for Whitmore Development. A woman sat down at the table beside her, arranging stacks of legal papers with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. She was older, perhaps 60, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. "First time representing yourself?" the woman asked without looking up. Elena nodded. "Is it that obvious?" "The panic in your eyes gives it away." The woman finally looked up and offered a small smile. "I am Judge Patricia Hendricks. Retired now, but I volunteer here 3 days a week, helping people navigate the system." Elena felt her heart rate spike. A judge, even a retired one. That seemed like exactly the kind of person who could help her. "I was a family court judge for 22 years, Hendricks continued. "Saw a lot of cases like yours. Woman gives up her career to support her husband. Husband decides he wants someone younger. Woman ends up with nothing. It is depressingly common. Is there anything I can do?" Elena asked. "I have proof that I created designs that are now credited to another company, but I do not know how to use that proof in court." Hendricks reached for Elena's folder and began flipping through the documents. She paused at the file list, her eyebrows rising slightly. "You have creation dates for all of these? My friend's son helped me extract the metadata. Every file has a timestamp showing when it was originally created." "And this other company, Ashford Creative Solutions, when were they registered?" 3 years ago. 2 years after I started creating these designs." Hendricks set down the folder and looked at Elena with an expression that was difficult to read. "Mrs. Collins, I cannot give you legal advice, but I can tell you that in my experience, the cases that succeed are the ones where everything is documented: timestamps, email records, witness statements, paper trails. The court deals in facts, not feelings. I have the timestamps, but I do not have emails or witnesses. Everything was verbal. I trusted my husband." Hendricks nodded slowly. "Trust is the foundation of a good marriage. Unfortunately, it is not admissible in court." She stood and gathered her paper. "If you want to research precedents for intellectual property claims in divorce cases, start with the Williams versus Williams decision from 2008. It established that creative work done during a marriage can be considered marital property even without formal contracts." "Thank you," Elena said. "Why are you helping me?" Hendricks paused at the edge of the table. "Because I have been watching you for the past hour, Mrs. Collins, and I have seen a lot of women come through this library. The ones who survive are the ones who document everything." She left without another word, but Elena noticed that she had left behind a business card, Patricia Hendricks, followed by a phone number and the words "Family Court Consultant." Elena tucked the card into her wallet and got to work. The research took 3 days. 3 days of sitting in the law library from opening to closing, reading case files and legal precedents and court decisions until her eyes burned. 3 days of eating vending machine snacks because she could not afford to buy lunch. 3 days of coming home to Rose's apartment exhausted and discouraged, only to wake up the next morning and do it all over again. But on the 4th day, Elena found something that changed everything. She was searching through Whitmore Development's public filings, the documents that all companies were required to submit to state regulators, when she noticed a discrepancy. The company's marketing expenses had increased dramatically 3 years ago, the same year Ashford Creative Solutions was registered. According to the filings, Whitmore Development had paid Ashford Creative Solutions over $200,000 for brand development services. $200,000. For work that Elena had done for free. She dug deeper. The payments had been made quarterly. steady amounts that suggested an ongoing contract rather than a one-time project. The money had flowed from Whitmore Development to Ashford Creative Solutions like clockwork, while Elena had been sitting in her home office creating the actual designs without receiving a single dollar. They were not just taking credit for her work. They were getting paid for it. Elena's hands were shaking as she saved the documents to her laptop. This was fraud. Actual, provable fraud. Marcus and Brittany, and probably her father, Harold Ashford, had created a scheme to steal Elena's intellectual property and profit from it. But how could she prove it? The metadata showed that her files were created first, but Marcus could claim she had backdated them. The public filings showed the payments, but his lawyers could argue that Ashford Creative Solutions had provided legitimate services. She needed more. She needed someone who had been inside the company, someone who had seen what was happening and could testify to it. She thought about Kevin's explanation of metadata, about how every action on a computer left a trace, about how server logs could show when files were accessed and modified, about how digital forensics could reveal secrets that people thought were hidden. Elena opened LinkedIn and started searching for former Whitmore Development employees. Someone in that company had to know the truth. Someone had to have seen what was happening. She found him on page 3 of her search results. Danny Cooper, 28, former IT administrator at Whitmore Development. According to his profile, he had been terminated 6 months ago. No new position listed. No endorsements from former colleagues. Elena sent him a connection request with a simple message. My name is Elena Collins. I was married to Marcus Whitmore. I think you might know something about what happened to my design files. Can we talk? She did not expect a response. She certainly did not expect the response she received 3 hours later. Meet me tomorrow, Danny wrote. The diner on 42nd and 8th, noon. Come alone. And Mrs. Collins, be careful. You have no idea what you are getting into. The diner was the kind of place that survived on cheap coffee and anonymity. Danny Cooper was already seated in a back booth when Elena arrived, his eyes darting to the door every few seconds, like he expected trouble to walk in at any moment. He was younger than she had expected, with a nervous energy that suggested he had not slept well in months. His fingers drummed constantly against the table, and he flinched when the waitress approached to refill his coffee. Thank you for meeting me, Elena said as she slid into the booth across from him. I almost did not come. Danny's voice was barely above a whisper. I have been trying to forget about Whitmore Development, trying to move on, but then I got your message, and I realized that maybe moving on is not the same as running away. What happened? Why were you fired? Danny laughed, but there was no humor in it. I was fired because I asked questions about server access logs, about files that were being deleted and replaced with different versions, about why the metadata on certain design files did not match the timestamps in the company records. Elena leaned forward. You noticed the discrepancy. I am an IT guy. Noticing discrepancies is literally my job. Danny pulled a USB drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. 3 months before they fired me, I started saving copies of everything I found. Server logs showing file manipulation. Email chains between Marcus and Brittany discussing how to clean up the paper trail. And security footage from the building that shows Brittany physically taking files from what I am pretty sure was your home office. Elena stared at the USB drive like it was a live grenade. Why did you save all of this? Because I knew something was wrong. Because I thought eventually someone would come asking questions. Because Danny paused and met her eyes for the first time. Because my mom was in a similar situation 20 years ago. My dad stole her business and left her with nothing. She never recovered. I watched it destroy her. When I saw the same thing happening at Whitmore Development, I knew I could not just look away. Look away. Elena picked up the USB drive. Her hand was trembling. This could change everything. This could prove what Marcus did. It could, Danny agreed. But Mrs. Collins, you need to understand something. These people are powerful. They have lawyers and private investigators and connections in places you cannot even imagine. When they find out you have this evidence, they will come after you. They will try to destroy you. They might succeed. They have already destroyed me, Elena said. I lost my home, my marriage, my reputation. I am 7 months pregnant and sleeping on a stranger's couch. What else can they take? Danny's expression was grim. You would be surprised. That night, Elena sat on Rose's couch and reviewed the files Danny had given her. Kevin sat beside her, helping her navigate the technical documents, his teenage enthusiasm tempered by the seriousness of what they were uncovering. The server logs showed a clear pattern. Files created on Elena's computer had been uploaded to the Whitmore development server, then systematically replaced with versions that had different metadata. The new versions credited Ashford Creative Solutions as the creator, with timestamps that matched the company's registration date. Someone had literally rewritten history to erase Elena's contributions. The email chains were even more damning. In one exchange, from 18 months ago, Marcus had written to Brittany, "Make sure all of Elena's original files are removed from the server. We cannot have any trail leading back to her." Brittany had responded, "Already done." My father's team cleaned up the metadata. As far as anyone can tell, Ashford Creative Solutions created everything from scratch. Elena felt sick. She had been living with Marcus while he was actively conspiring to steal her work. She had been cooking his dinners and rubbing his shoulders and planning their baby's nursery while he was sending emails about how to erase her existence from his company's records. "Mrs. Elena," Kevin said quietly, "there is something else." He pulled up a video file, security footage from the Whitmore development building, time-stamped from 2 years ago. The image was grainy, but clear enough to show Brittany Ashford entering Elena's home, office, with a box. She emerged 10 minutes later with the box full of papers and folders. "That is my filing cabinet," Elena said. "Those are my original sketches and project notes. She took your physical files, too," Kevin confirmed. "This is not just digital theft. This is systematic destruction of evidence." Elena closed her laptop and sat in silence for a long moment. The baby kicked, a reminder that she was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her daughter's future, for the right to tell her child someday that Mama did not let the bad people win. "I am going to file a motion with the court," she said finally. "Emergency request for discovery. I will submit all of this evidence and demand that Marcus produce his company's records." Kevin looked uncertain. "Mrs. Elena, are you sure? Danny said these people are dangerous." Elena thought about everything she had lost in the past 2 weeks. Her home, her marriage, her sense of security. The belief that if she just worked hard enough and loved hard enough, everything would turn out okay. She thought about the woman she had been on her birthday morning, excited to show Marcus the rebrand she had created for his company. So eager to please, so desperate for approval, so willing to give away her work for free because that was what wives did. She was not that woman anymore. That woman had been evicted from her home and left standing on a street corner with $847 and a baby on the way. That woman had been broken, but broken things could be rebuilt, and sometimes they came back stronger. "I am sure," Elena said, "it is time to stop running and start fighting." She filed the motion the next morning. Emergency request for discovery in the matter of Collins versus Whitmore. She included the metadata analysis, the email chains, the security footage, everything Danny had given her, organized and documented according to the legal formatting she had learned at the law library. For the first time in weeks, Elena felt hope, real hope. She had evidence, she had proof, she had a chance. As she went to bed that night feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay, she was wrong. The pounding on the door came at 6 in the morning. Elena jerked awake on Rosa's couch, her heart racing, her hand automatically going to her belly to protect the baby. Rosa appeared in the doorway, her bathrobe hastily tied, her expression a mixture of confusion and fear. "Stay there," she told Elena. "I will see who it is." Elena heard the door open. She heard voices, male and authoritative. She heard Rosa say something that sounded like a protest, and then she heard the words that made her blood run cold. "Elena Collins, you are under arrest for unauthorized computer access and theft of proprietary data. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Two police officers appeared in the living room doorway. Behind them stood a man in a suit who Elena recognized from research she had done on Marcus's business associates. Private security, the kind of firm that wealthy people hired when they wanted problems to disappear. "There must be a mistake," Elena said, struggling to stand with her pregnant belly, throwing off her balance. "I did not steal anything. Those files are mine. I created them." The officer who had read her rights looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we are just executing a warrant. You can explain your side to the judge." "She is 7 months pregnant," Rosa protested. "You cannot just drag her off to jail." "We are not dragging anyone," the officer said, "but she needs to come with us. Now." They let her put on shoes and grab her wallet. They did not let her take her laptop, which was sitting on Rosa's coffee table. The laptop that contained all of her evidence. The laptop that Danny's USB drive was still plugged into. As they walked her out of the apartment, Elena saw Rosa's children standing in the hallway. Kevin's face was pale. Sarah was crying. Michael looked confused. "I am sorry," Elena mouthed to Rosa. "I am so sorry." Rosa's expression hardened with determination. "Do not you dare apologize. You did not do anything wrong. I will find you help. I will figure this out." The holding cell smelled like despair and industrial disinfectant. Elena sat on a metal bench with her hands folded over her belly, trying to breathe through the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. She had been fingerprinted and photographed like a criminal. She had been asked if she had any weapons or contraband, as if a 7-month pregnant woman in sweatpants was concealing something dangerous. She had been placed in a cell with 3 other women, none of whom seemed interested in conversation. The charges, according to the officer who had processed her, were serious. Unauthorized computer access was a felony. Theft of proprietary data could carry a sentence of up to 5 years. Marcus's lawyers had painted her as a disgruntled ex-wife who had hacked into his company's systems to steal trade secrets. The evidence she had gathered now spun as proof of her criminal activity. Danny's USB drive, allegedly obtained through illegal means. The metadata showing her files were created first, supposedly fabricated to support her false claims. They had turned everything upside down. They had taken her proof and made it into a weapon against her. A guard appeared at the cell door. "Collins, your lawyer is here." "I do not have a lawyer," Elena said. "Well, someone is here claiming to be your lawyer." The guard shrugged. "You can refuse to see them if you want." Elena followed the guard to a small meeting room where a woman was waiting. She was elegant, professional, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed familiar. "Mrs. Collins," the woman said, "my name is Catherine Montgomery. I run a non-profit organization that provides legal assistance to women in domestic situations. Your friend Rosa Williams called us this morning." Elena sank into the chair across from Catherine. "I cannot afford a lawyer. I can barely afford food. Our services are free for qualifying clients. And based on what Rosa told us, You definitely qualify. Catherine opened a leather folder and pulled out several documents. I have been reviewing your case. The charges against you are serious, but they are also incredibly flimsy. The warrant was obtained based on a complaint from Whitmore Development's security firm, not actual evidence of criminal activity. They took my laptop. All of my evidence was on it. Catherine smiled. That is actually good news. If they took your laptop as evidence, it means everything on it becomes part of the official record, including the files that prove your designs predate Ashford Creative Solutions, including the email chains that show Marcus and Brittany conspiring to steal your work. Elena felt a flicker of hope. So, this could actually help my case? It could. If we play this right, their attempt to silence you might end up being the thing that proves your innocence. The charges were dropped 6 days later. Insufficient evidence, the prosecutor said, declining to pursue a case that was clearly designed to harass and intimidate rather than seek justice. But the damage was done. Elena had spent nearly a week in custody, missing a prenatal appointment and losing the fragile stability she had built at Rosa's apartment. The arrest had made the news, a small item in the business section about Marcus Whitmore's ex-wife being taken into custody for alleged corporate espionage. Worse, Danny Cooper had disappeared. His phone was disconnected. His apartment was empty. When Catherine's investigators tried to locate him, they found nothing. It was as if he had never existed. He was our key witness, Elena said, sitting in Catherine's office 2 weeks after her release. Without him, all I have is circumstantial evidence. We will find him, Catherine assured her. People do not just vanish. He is probably scared and hiding, but we will find him. And in the meantime, we focus on your divorce case and custody arrangement. Your hearing is scheduled for next week. Elena's hand went to her belly. The baby was due in 6 weeks. She had been so focused on proving Marcus's fraud that she had almost forgotten the more immediate battle she was facing. The battle for her child. Marcus is going to fight for custody, she said, not because he wants the baby, because he wants to hurt me. Catherine nodded grimly. That is a common tactic in these situations. Use the child as a weapon. What are my chances? Honestly, not great. Catherine's expression was sympathetic, but direct. You have been arrested. You are living on someone else's couch. You have no stable income and no permanent residence. Marcus has expensive lawyers and unlimited resources. The family court system is supposed to prioritize the child's best interests, but in practice, it often favors the parent who can provide the most material stability. So I am going to lose my baby. I did not say that. Catherine leaned forward. I said your chances are not great, but I have seen plenty of cases where the underdog won. The key is documentation, evidence, showing the court who Marcus really is, not who he presents himself to be. Elena thought about the files that had been taken from her laptop. The metadata, the emails, the security footage. All of it was now in the possession of the prosecutor's office, part of the case file for charges that had been dropped. That evidence is still out there, Elena said slowly. The prosecutor has it. Can we subpoena it for the custody hearing? Catherine's eyes widened. Mrs. Collins, that is actually brilliant. If we can get the prosecutor to release those files as part of our discovery process, we can use Marcus's own attack against him. Make the call, Elena said. It is time to stop playing defense. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late February. Elena arrived at the family courthouse with Catherine by her side, her belly now so large that walking was more of a waddle than a stride. The baby was due in 4 weeks. 4 weeks to prove she deserved to be a mother. Judge Patricia Hendricks was presiding, the same judge Elena had met at the law library, The same judge who had given her that business card and told her to document everything. Elena did not know if that was good or bad. Marcus arrived with 3 lawyers and Brittany on his arm. He was wearing a suit that cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe, and his expression was the confident smirk of someone who believed he had already won. His legal team presented their case first. They described Elena as unstable, vindictive, obsessed with revenge against her successful ex-husband. They mentioned her arrest. They described her living situation as unsuitable for a child. They painted a picture of a woman who had lost her grip on reality, who had tried to destroy her ex-husband's business out of spite, who could not be trusted with the welfare of an innocent baby. Elena wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up and tell the court about everything Marcus had done, about the stolen designs and the fabricated evidence and the systematic campaign to destroy her life. But Catherine had warned her to stay calm, to let the evidence speak for itself. When it was their turn, Catherine stood and addressed the court with quiet confidence. Your Honor, the respondent has painted my client as a dangerous and unstable woman, but I would like to present evidence that tells a very different story. She submitted the files that had been recovered from the prosecutor's office. The metadata showing Elena's designs predated Ashford Creative Solutions. The email chains between Marcus and Brittany discussing how to steal Elena's work. The security footage of Brittany taking files from Elena's home office. Judge Hendricks reviewed the documents carefully, her expression unreadable. Mr. Whitmore, these emails appear to show you and your current partner conspiring to steal intellectual property from your former wife. Would you care to explain? Marcus's lead attorney jumped in. Your Honor, those emails are taken out of context. My client was simply discussing routine business matters. Routine business matters that involve eliminating evidence and rewriting file metadata? Catherine countered. Your Honor, I would also like to submit this document. It shows that Whitmore Development paid over $200,000 to Ashford Creative Solutions for work that was actually created by my client, work she did for free while she was married to the respondent. The judge's eyebrows rose. $200,000? For designs my client created. Designs that were credited to a company owned by the respondent's current partner's father. This is not just intellectual property theft. This is fraud. Marcus's confident smirk was fading. He whispered something to his lawyer, who whispered back with an expression that suggested things were not going according to plan. Judge Hendricks set down the documents and folded her hands. This is a custody hearing, not a fraud trial. However, the evidence presented here raises serious questions about Mr. Whitmore's character and judgment. I am going to order a continuance to allow for a full investigation of these allegations. Your Honor, Marcus's lawyer protested, my client has an important business trip scheduled. He cannot delay his life indefinitely because of his ex-wife's fantasies. Hendricks's expression hardened. Mr. Whitmore's business schedule is not my concern. The welfare of an unborn child is. This hearing is continued for 30 days. In the meantime, I am ordering that all custody arrangements remain in the status quo. Elena felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Status quo meant the baby would stay with her after birth. Status quo meant she had 30 more days to build her case. As they left the courthouse, Catherine squeezed Elena's hand. That was a good start, but we are not out of the woods yet. Marcus has resources we do not have. He will come back with everything he has got. I know, Elena said, but for the first time, I feel like I actually have a chance. The anonymous email arrived 3 days later. Elena almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but something about the subject line made her pause. I have information about Marcus Whitmore. Meet me at the coffee shop on 3rd Avenue. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. Elena showed the email to Catherine, who advised caution. It could be a trap. Marcus might be trying to set you up again, or it could be someone who wants to help. Elena thought about Danny Cooper, who had also reached out anonymously before agreeing to meet. Danny had been scared, but genuine. Maybe this was someone like him. If you go, Catherine said, be careful. Text me every 15 minutes so I know you are okay. The coffee shop was busy with the afternoon crowd, which made Elena feel safer than she would have in an empty restaurant. She ordered a decaf latte and found a table near the window where she could watch the door. Brittany Ashford walked in 10 minutes later. Elena's first instinct was to run. This was the woman who had slept with her husband, the woman who had worn her dead foster mother's robe like a trophy, the woman who had stolen her designs and her life and her future. But Brittany was wearing sunglasses despite the overcast day. When she sat down across from Elena and removed them, Elena saw why. A fading bruise spread beneath Brittany's left eye. Another bruise, yellowing with age, marked her jawline. I know you have no reason to trust me, Brittany said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. But I need you to understand, I did not know about your designs, about the prenup trap, about any of it. Elena stared at the woman who had destroyed her marriage. You did not know that you were sleeping with a married man? Brittany flinched. I knew that, and I am not trying to excuse it. But Marcus told me your marriage was over. He said you were just staying together for appearances until the divorce was finalized. He said you knew about us, and you did not care. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Brittany's voice cracked. I was 27 years old, and my boss was paying attention to me and making me feel special. I thought I was in love. I did not realize until later that I was just useful. Elena looked at the bruises on Brittany's face. When did he start hitting you? 3 months ago, right after I found out I was pregnant. Elena's hand went instinctively to her own belly. You are pregnant? 10 weeks. Brittany's eyes filled with tears. And I just watched what he did to you, how he threw you away the moment you became inconvenient. And I realized that I am next. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Elena thought about all the anger she had carried toward Brittany, all the hatred, all the fantasies of revenge and comeuppance. But looking at the bruised woman across from her, Elena felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but recognition. The recognition of someone who had also been manipulated by a man who viewed women as tools to be used and discarded. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked. Because I have access to everything. Brittany pulled a slip of paper from her purse. Email addresses, financial records, the original files that prove you created those designs. I have been secretly copying everything to a personal cloud account for the past month. This is the login information. Elena looked at the paper but did not take it. What do you want in return? I want out. Brittany's voice was desperate. I want to get away from Marcus before he does to me what he did to you. Or worse. Elena thought about it. A few weeks ago, she would have rejected any offer from Brittany. She would have assumed it was another trap, another manipulation in Marcus's endless game. But things had changed. Elena had changed. She had learned that allies could come from unexpected places. That survival sometimes meant accepting help from people you had every reason to hate. She reached across the table and took the paper. The bleeding started at 3 a.m, 4 days before Elena's due date. She woke on Rose's couch with a sharp pain in her abdomen and a spreading warmth beneath her that meant something was very wrong. Rosa called an ambulance while Elena tried not to panic. The paramedics were kind and efficient, loading her onto a stretcher and asking questions about her pregnancy history while the sirens wailed through the dark streets of Manhattan. At the hospital, Dr. Sarah Webb met her in the emergency department. Elena had been seeing her for prenatal care for the past 2 months, one of the few constants in her chaotic life. "Elena, what happened?" Dr. Webb asked, examining her with quick, professional movements. "I do not know. I woke up, and there was blood." Elena's voice was shaking. "Is my baby okay?" "We are going to find out." Dr. Webb turned to the nurses. "Get her to ultrasound immediately, and page the on-call obstetrician. We might need to deliver tonight." The next few hours blurred together. Ultrasounds and blood tests and fetal monitoring, doctors speaking in hushed tones just outside her door. Rosa arriving still in her bathrobe, having left her children with a neighbor. Finally, Dr. Webb came back with news. "Elena, your placenta has partially detached. It is a condition called placental abruption. It can be very serious, but we caught it early. What does that mean for my baby? It means we need to deliver soon, within the next 24 hours. Dr. Webb's expression was gentle but serious. "Your body is under enormous stress, Elena. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. If we wait too long, it could put both you and the baby at risk." Elena nodded, trying to process the information. "Okay, do what you need to do." "There is something else." Dr. Webb sat on the edge of the bed. "I have seen your chart. I know what you have been through in the past few months. The divorce, the arrest, the custody battle. Elena, stress like that takes a physical toll. Your body has been telling you to slow down, and you have been pushing through instead." "I did not have a choice," Elena whispered. "I had to fight. I know, and I am not judging you, but right now, you need to rest. Whatever battles you are fighting out there, they need to wait. Your only job right now is to bring this baby safely into the world." Elena closed her eyes and placed her hands on her belly. She could feel the baby moving, strong kicks that seemed to protest the confined space. In a few hours, maybe less, she would finally meet her daughter. The tiny person she had been fighting for since the moment Marcus handed her those divorce papers. "Okay," she said. "I will rest." She was sleeping when Marcus arrived. The sound of voices in the hallway woke her, and she recognized his tone immediately. The authoritative, entitled voice of a man who expected the world to accommodate his wishes. She opened her eyes to find Marcus standing in her doorway with his attorney and a sheriff's deputy. "What are you doing here?" Elena struggled to sit up. "I am filing for emergency custody." Marcus's expression was cold and satisfied. "You are clearly unable to care for yourself, let alone a child. Look at you. You are having a medical emergency because of your own poor decisions." Dr. Webb appeared behind him. "Mr. Whitmore, this is my patient. You cannot just barge in here. I have every right to be here." Marcus pulled a document from his briefcase. "This is a court order granting me temporary custody of any child born to Elena Collins, effective immediately upon delivery." Elena felt the room spinning. No, they could not do this. She had 30 more days. The judge had said 30 more days. The continuance was for the hearing, Marcus's attorney explained. But my client had legitimate concerns about the child's welfare, given the mother's current medical situation. Judge Henderson signed the order this morning. Not Judge Hendricks, a different judge, one that Marcus's lawyers had found and convinced with half-truths and manipulated evidence. "You cannot take my baby," Elena's voice was rising. "You cannot do this." The sheriff's deputy stepped forward with an uncomfortable expression. "Ma'am, I am just here to serve the papers." "The court will sort out the details." Dr. Webb positioned herself between Marcus and Elena's bed. "Everyone needs to leave right now. My patient is in the middle of a medical crisis. Whatever legal disputes you have can wait until she is stable." "Doctor," Marcus said smoothly, "I understand your concern, but the welfare of my child is at stake." "Your child?" Elena laughed bitterly. "You did not want this baby. You called our pregnancy unfortunate timing. You said it would not change your decision to leave me. I said a lot of things I regret. Marcus's tone shifted to something that almost sounded sincere. But I am the father. I have rights. What you have is money and lawyers and a complete lack of conscience. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. You do not want to be a father. You want to win. That is all you have ever wanted. A new voice cut through the chaos. Mr. Whitmore, I would strongly advise you to step back from a woman in active medical distress. Judge Patricia Hendricks stood in the doorway. She was wearing casual clothes, not her judicial robes, and she looked like she had arrived in a hurry. Judge Hendricks, Marcus's attorney said, with barely concealed surprise, what are you doing here? I was visiting my sister down the hall when I heard the commotion. Hendricks's expression was steely. I am off the bench right now, but I can tell you that this does not look good for anyone. Showing up at a hospital to serve custody papers on a woman who is about to give birth, the optics are terrible. This is a legitimate legal action, Marcus protested. I am sure it is. But I am also sure that any judge reviewing this situation will want to know why you felt it necessary to traumatize a woman in labor. Hendricks turned to the sheriff's deputy. The papers have been served. There is nothing more for you to do here. The deputy looked relieved to have an excuse to leave. Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am. He retreated down the hallway. After a long moment, Marcus followed with his attorney, but not before shooting Elena a look of pure hatred. This is not over, he said. It never is, Elena replied, but I am not afraid of you anymore. Grace Rosa Collins was born at 4:17 in the morning, weighing 6 pounds and 14 ounces. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin, and she screamed with the fury of someone who had opinions about being removed from her comfortable home. Elena held her daughter for the first time and felt something she had never experienced before. Complete, unconditional, overwhelming love. The kind of love that made everything she had suffered worth it. The kind of love that made her understand, finally, what she was fighting for. Hello, beautiful girl, Elena whispered. I am your mama. And I promise you, I am going to make sure you have the best life I can give you, no matter what it takes. Rosa arrived an hour later, with flowers and a stuffed elephant that was bigger than the baby. She cried when she saw Grace, and she cried again when Elena asked her to be the godmother. You saved my life, Elena said. You took me in when I had nowhere to go. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. I want you to be part of my daughter's life forever. Rosa wiped her eyes. Honey, I would be honored. Catherine Montgomery visited the next day with updates on the legal situation. The emergency custody order Marcus had obtained was temporary and would be reviewed at a hearing scheduled for the following week. But she also had good news. Danny Cooper contacted us, Catherine said. He has been hiding in Portland with family. Marcus's people threatened him, which is why he disappeared. But he is willing to testify via video deposition. Elena felt her heart lift. Really? That is not all. Catherine pulled out a folder. Brittany's cloud files have been verified by our digital forensics team. Everything checks out. The original designs, the email chains, the financial records. We have enough evidence to prove not just intellectual property theft, but systematic fraud. What about the federal charges? The prosecutor dropped my case, but what about Marcus? Catherine smiled. I have been in contact with the FBI. They are very interested in the financial irregularities at Whitmore Development. Apparently, Marcus has been inflating property values to secure loans he could not otherwise qualify for. Wire fraud, bank fraud, securities violations. The kind of charges that come with serious prison time. Elena looked down at Grace, who who was sleeping peacefully in her hospital bassinet. So it is really over? We won? Not yet, Catherine cautioned. Marcus still has resources. He could fight this for years. But for the first time, I think we have a real chance. The week that followed was a blur of legal preparations and sleepless nights with a newborn. Elena was discharged from the hospital, but moved into a shelter for domestic violence survivors that Catherine's organization operated. It was not ideal, but it was safe, and it gave her a stable address that would look better in court. The custody hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. Elena spent Thursday night reviewing documents with Catherine, going over every detail of their presentation until she could recite it from memory. "Are you ready?" Catherine asked. Elena thought about everything she had been through. The birthday morning, when Marcus had handed her divorce papers, the eviction from her home, the arrest, the hospital, all of the moments when she had wanted to give up. When the fight had seemed impossible, when the odds had been so stacked against her that surrender seemed like the only option. But she had not surrendered. She had kept fighting. And now, finally, she had a chance to tell her story. "I am ready," she said. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the case, about the billionaire who had divorced his pregnant wife on her birthday and then tried to steal her baby. Social media was buzzing with the story. Several news outlets had reporters in the gallery. Judge Hendricks presided, her expression carefully neutral. But Elena noticed something in her eyes when she looked at Marcus, something that looked like contempt, barely concealed beneath professional composure. Catherine presented their case with devastating precision. The metadata proving Elena's designs predated Ashford Creative Solutions. The email chains showing Marcus and Brittany conspiring to steal her work. The security footage, the financial records, Danny Cooper's video deposition, in which he described everything he had witnessed at Whitmore Development. And then Catherine called her final witness. Brittany Ashford walked into the courtroom with her head held high. She had left Marcus 2 weeks ago, moving into a safe house provided by Catherine's organization. The bruises on her face had faded, but her testimony made clear that they had not been imagined. She described how Marcus had presented Elena as a crazy ex-wife who needed to be managed, how he had coached Brittany on what to say and do to make Elena look unstable, how the entire narrative of Elena as a gold digger and corporate spy had been manufactured to cover Marcus's own crimes. When Brittany finished, the courtroom was silent. Even Marcus's team of expensive lawyers seemed to realize that they had lost. Judge Hendricks took a long moment before speaking. "This court has heard extensive testimony about Mr. Whitmore's character and conduct. The evidence presented suggests not just intellectual property theft, but a systematic campaign to destroy his former wife's credibility and steal her child." She turned to Marcus. "Mr. Whitmore, I have seen a lot of cases in my 20 years on the bench, but I do not think I have ever seen someone work so hard to hurt another person. Your ex-wife built your brand. She gave you 5 years of her life and her professional skills. And your response was to throw her away, steal her work, and try to take her child. Your Honor," Marcus's lawyer started. "I am not finished," Hendricks cut him off. "This court is granting full custody of Grace Rosa Collins to her mother, Elena Collins. Mr. Whitmore will have no visitation rights until he completes a psychological evaluation and demonstrates genuine change in his behavior. Additionally, I am referring this case to federal prosecutors for investigation of fraud charges." She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. 6 weeks later, Elena stood outside the Plaza Hotel in a dress she had bought at a thrift store and altered herself. The same hotel where Marcus was getting married to a new woman, a 23-year-old heiress whose father had business connections Marcus wanted to exploit. Brittany had tipped her off about the wedding. "He moves fast," Brittany had said, He cannot stand being alone. He always needs someone to control. Elena had not planned to come. She had won her case. She had her daughter. She had a job offer from Catherine's organization, working as a graphic designer for their outreach materials. She had a future. But there was one more thing she needed to do. The wedding reception was in full swing when Elena walked in. 400 guests turned to stare at the woman with the infant carrier on her arm, the woman who had become famous in certain circles as the one who brought down Marcus Whitmore. Security tried to stop her, but Catherine had arranged for 2 of her investigators to escort Elena inside. Legal observers, she had called them, here to document any attempt to interfere with Miss Collins. Diane Whitmore spotted her first. The older woman's face twisted with rage as she marched across the ballroom. "You have some nerve showing up here," Diane hissed. "After everything you have done to destroy this family." Elena smiled. "I have not destroyed anything, Mrs. Whitmore. I just told the truth. Your family destroyed itself." She walked past Diane toward the center of the room, where Marcus stood with his new bride. The young woman looked confused, clearly not briefed on the full history between her husband and his ex-wife. "Marcus," Elena said, "we need to talk. You need to leave." Marcus's voice was low and dangerous. "You are not welcome here. I know, but I wanted to give you something before I go." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, the same kind of manila folder that Marcus had used to serve her divorce papers on her birthday. Inside was documentation of everything: the fraud charges, the custody ruling, the FBI investigation that was proceeding despite Marcus's lawyer's best efforts. And at the very end, a copy of the rebranding work Elena had done for Whitmore Development. The original files, with their original metadata, proving once and for all who had created the visual identity that Marcus had built his empire upon. "I wanted you to have this," Elena said, "so that someday, when your new wife asks about your past, you can show her the truth. So that when your children, if you have any, ask what kind of man their father was, they will know." Marcus's face was white with rage. "You think you have won? You think this is over? I know it is not over." Elena looked at the young bride, who was starting to realize that she had married into something more complicated than she had been told. "But I also know that I am not afraid of you anymore. I have a daughter who needs me. I have friends who support me. I have a life that you cannot touch." She turned to address the crowd of wealthy guests, many of whom had done business with Whitmore Development, many of whom were now wondering if they had been defrauded. Marcus Whitmore divorced his pregnant wife on her birthday. He stole her work and credited it to his mistress's father's company. He tried to take her baby and destroy her reputation. And when none of that worked, he moved on to his next victim. She looked at the new bride. "I am sorry to ruin your wedding day, but I wish someone had told me what kind of man I was marrying. Consider this my wedding gift to you. The truth." She turned and walked out of the ballroom, Grace sleeping peacefully in her carrier, unaware of the drama surrounding her. Behind her, Elena could hear voices rising. The new bride demanding explanations, Diane trying to do damage control, Marcus shouting at his lawyers. But Elena did not look back. She had said what she needed to say. She had told her truth, and now she was going home to the life she had built from nothing. 6 months later, Elena sat in her new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in Brooklyn that she paid for with her own salary. Grace was crawling now, pulling herself across the carpet with determined concentration, her dark hair always falling into her eyes no matter how many clips Elena used. Rosa visited every Sunday for dinner. Catherine had become a friend as well as a legal advocate. Even Brittany stopped by occasionally, her own daughter growing strong and healthy. The 2 women bonded by their shared survival. Marcus was in federal custody, awaiting trial on 12 counts of fraud. Diane had retreated to a family estate in Connecticut, her social standing destroyed. The new bride had filed for annulment within a month of the wedding. Elena's blog had over 2 million followers. Women wrote to her every day, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival, asking for advice on how to fight back against systems that seemed designed to keep them down. She answered as many as she could. She told them the truth, that it would not be easy, that the odds would be against them, that there would be days when they wanted to give up. But she also told them about Rosa, who had offered a couch to a stranger, about Catherine, who had believed in her case when no one else would, about Danny and Brittany, who had risked everything to tell the truth. She told them that rock bottom was just a foundation, that broken things could be rebuilt, that the greatest revenge was not destruction, but survival. And she told them about Grace, who is now pulling herself up on the coffee table, reaching for a stuffed elephant that was still bigger than she was. "This is why we fight," Elena wrote in her latest post. "Not for revenge, not for victory, but for the people who come after us, for our daughters, who deserve to grow up in a world where their worth is not determined by the men who underestimate them." Grace fell backward onto her diaper, cushioned bottom, and looked up at her mother with an expression of mild indignation. Elena laughed and scooped her up. "I know, sweetheart, gravity is unfair, but we will figure it out together." She carried Grace to the window and looked out at the Brooklyn skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus was sitting in a cell, thinking about everything he had lost. Somewhere, Diane was nursing her wounded pride. Somewhere, the legal system was grinding through evidence that would keep the Whitmore family in court for years. But none of that mattered anymore. What mattered was this apartment, this baby, this life she had built from nothing. What mattered was that she had survived, and survival, Elena had learned, was its own kind of victory. Now, if stories like this matter to you, if you believe that women supporting women can change the world, if you want to see more content that combines powerful storytelling with real-life lessons, I would be so grateful if you could take 3 seconds to hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. That way, you will never miss a story that could change how you see the world. And if this story touches your heart, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Share your own experience if you feel comfortable. Your words might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear today. Sometimes a simple like or share can put the right story in front of the right person at the right moment, and that small action can change everything. Now, let us begin. Closing statement. Thank you for staying until the very end. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring meaningful lessons and emotional value to your day. Every word was chosen with intention. Every scene was crafted to honor the real struggles that millions of women face in silence. If Elena's story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, no matter how dark things seem right now, you have the strength to survive. You have the power to rebuild, and you are never, ever alone. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.